Hi, it's Genevieve and welcome to this episode of the Adventurous Podcast. Today, I am so excited to dig in with you guys and introduce you to Sebastian Enges. Sebastian is a performance coach and the CEO of Phoenix Consulting Group. Welcome, Sebastian, to Adventurous.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
You should be. Anyway, before we dive in, let's talk a little bit about Brex. I can speak from experience that being with the right bank, especially as a startup, is absolutely key. And I'm sure with your long history in entrepreneurship, Sebastian, you have had similar experiences. How important is it to you to be with the right bank?
Having a great financial partner is key and will help you grow in strategic times. So yeah, having a bank that you can rely on that's got your back, especially in crucial moments, is important.
Yes, crucial moments is when you really regret having the wrong bank. So entrepreneurs
Yes.
can scale their business much faster with Brex. You can open an account online in only 10 minutes, deposit cash, send payments, track spend, and get a credit card with 10 to 20x higher limits. No personal guarantee and no fees. And you also get rewards like 7x back on rideshare and 2x back on recurring software. It's awesome. Visit Adventurous Podcast for a special offer from Brex. So, Sebastian, we have had many conversations over the past couple of months about many things. Many things. And we've talked of many things. Shoes, ships, sealing wax, cabbages, and also kings. Do you know what that's from? Bonus points if you do.
Nope.
It's from Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, it's a good one.
Anyway, so we have a lot of similar upbringings. We both grew up in small towns in Washington. We both probably had altercations with blackberry bushes at some point, many things, military families and all of that stuff. But, there's one story I was hearing from you that I kind of wanted to unpack in a little bit more, fast forwarding through that to, your current company and where you're at now. And you had talked about how there was sort of a pivotal moment for you where you had a young son, newly married, you can paint the picture probably better than I can. And you had to have sort of a grounding moment where you wrote a word for yourself on the mirror, and that word was trust. So I would love to know, and if you want to frame this up with, where you're at today, what's going on with your business, what's going on with your life, and what was happening for you back then that had to be something you needed to do.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. It was coming out of the Great Recession, as I think we call it now, right? This 2008, 2009. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life, which you kind of hinted at there. Entrepreneurism it's built into me. That's the world that I live in. But 2008 was particularly hard for, I think, everyone, entrepreneurs and everyone else. And coming out the other side of that, I was going through a very difficult time and was newly married. I've been married for, I think, just a few years, and we had a 9-month-old son, and I had a choice. Do I play it safe? Somebody had offered me a job, which jobs, like the idea of having a job, literally makes my skin crawl. But I've been offered a job that was, well paying for most standards. Mm-hmm. Or do I take an entrepreneurial route and take advantage of an opportunity that had been presented to me?
Were you already in a company at this point? Had you started your business, or were you at a crossroads?
No, at the moment that the frame trust was, when I had made a decision to go the entrepreneurial route, but by quick math seemed far more risky, right? Yeah. I think the position that I passed up was like $180,000. I think salary was the projection with another 60 in commission, running the regional sales, West Coast sales for a big software company. And certainly coming out of 2008, 2009, that was tempting. And yet in my heart, I felt there was another path, and there was something that I was called to do and that I was meant to do. And on the surface, there's no way, had I not learned to listen, and that's certainly something we could get more into, but had I not learned to listen to my heart and to my intuition much earlier in my life, I could have easily explained away that and gone with what seemed to be the far more logical route and the far more secure route.
Right.
And so it was a hard, and then I'm having to explain to my wife, knew I was an entrepreneur, so thankfully I had that on my side. She knew what she was getting into from the beginning, but then I had to explain to her, yeah, I'm going to pass on this opportunity. And made the decision together, to be fair, but I'm going to pass on this opportunity to do something that no guaranteed salary, no guaranteed pay, with the upside of a different life altogether. And that's really the math. It's like, hey, here's our paths. We can either do the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and we'll have a good life, but it won't be necessarily on our terms, or I can sacrifice the next 3 to 5 years and we live life on our terms.
Hmm.
Which one do you want?
Yeah.
And she was in agreement with me, like, hey, let's go for it, 3 to 5 years. But 9-month old at home is a tough one. That's
Hmm.
you know it means I was leaving her at the time. I had calculated, the key to this is I had somewhat over over promised here on the time. I said it would probably be 6 days a week, 12 to 14-hour days, which basically meant I was going to be home one day a week, which would be Sunday.
Yeah.
And so that meant that she was going to be home a lot with our oldest son, Lucas. And that was what was so tough for me for a number of reasons. I was raised by a single mom. Money dictated every decision that was made in my household, which is kind of part of the reason I am who I am. And I decided at a very young
Yeah.
age that wasn't going to be my life. Um, but it was hard to make that decision every day and to leave my family every day, especially at that time. And I knew, young mom, 9-month old is tough. And so I made the decision and it worked for me. Now, I wish I could tell you those conditions would prime anyone to do everything in their power to come through. I've now, 10 years later, 12 years later, I'm like, yeah, that those conditions don't create that in everyone, which is
No.
interesting.
Hmm.
But for me, it was, I have no other choice but to win. Like, if I'm going to be away from my family, if I'm going to be away from my son, then it has to be worth it. And so there were mornings I would literally drive in, and the business that I had started, it was consulting with AT&T. It was in Rancho Cucamonga, which for me is like 73 miles away, which is a pretty big commute. It's, you got to take the 91 to get out there, which I'm pretty sure was conceived in the pit of hell and then brought here. It's like, here's the highway from hell. So, but that was a long drive every single day. And where the story comes in is, there were days I was literally tears in my eyes driving away from my house and
Yeah.
just frustrated and pissed off I wasn't further along. But what I would do, to your question, was I'd get out of the shower and the mirror, or get out of the shower in our 1 bedroom, I don't know, 900 square foot apartment. And which is, that's fun. You look back at stuff and I think there's, anyway, but it was a fogged mirror and I would write trust with my hand in the mirror.
Hmm.
It was the last thing I'd write before I'd leave the bathroom. Trust.
So you did this more than once. This was
Oh,
like a ritual.
it was almost
It was
14
like an
months of repetition.
affirmation. Yeah.
Yeah, constant.
Yeah.
And because I didn't get it, I didn't quite understand how what I was doing was going to connect to my purpose or my calling, which sometimes that can be weird for people, but I absolutely believe we all drop in here with purpose. There's a reason why we're here.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
I couldn't quite connect the dots, but in my heart of hearts, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I just didn't understand why. And so I had to override, which I'm a deeply logical person. So I had to like override some of the process of like, how does this add up? Because I wanted to know more. And in that season, I was to not know more. I was to trust, to do the step right in front of me. And that was all I was given. So it took me about 14 months of writing that on the bathroom mirror before it all started to click. And that was it. It was a formidable season in my life, an important season in my life that led to a lot of, the success we've had now. Now, fast forward, that small little, I think the first year I made 40,000, 49,000. I don't know, it was in the 40s anyway, from an income
Net?
standpoint net. Yeah, it was not much. Now,
Uh-huh.
to running a company that I think we've done a few $100 million now in LTV, and and have grown 5,000%. We have offices across the country. My master bedroom is bigger than the apartment that, um, you know,
Hmm. Do
I had when we started, which it just,
you
I
have a
only
bowling
say
alley in
that
your
to
house?
say, huh?
Do you have a bowling alley or a skating rink?
No,
You're
no, no,
not there yet.
no, not there yet.
You
And
haven't made it.
no, no, it's true. You haven't made it until you have a bowling alley.
Until you have a skating rink. Actually, for
Yeah.
me, I want a flamingo pond. That's when I've made
Oh,
it.
that,
When
yeah.
I can sit on my back porch and watch flamingos fight.
I see. I'm there with you already. Like I get it.
I'm kind of
Flamingos
joking.
stink is the
Yeah.
only thing, but they are
Yeah.
beautiful.
But they're funny when they're fight.
Yes.
You touched on so many things that I just like want to unpack all of that, and I don't know how to do that right now. But I think one of the things I myself had a similar experience for many years where my path made absolutely no sense. It was not working. I was not making money, and I kept kind of logically saying this doesn't make any sense and I literally look crazy and stupid and
Been
everyone in
there.
my life is worried about me. My parents, my family, they're finally at a place where they're like she's going to be okay, it worked out, but it was not that was not the case. And I remember, even my little brother, he bought a place and he came to me one day and he was like, we have an extra bedroom at our house. And I'm like, cool. And he's like, so if you ever need it, I'm like, oh no, my family really like, but I mean, aside from that, I definitely had lots of, filling up journals with angst, not understanding why my path wasn't working. And it wasn't until it worked that
Yes.
then I looked back at the journey that made no sense. And I think for me, my saving grace was some sort of universal intervention. Every time I would try to go do something else
Yeah.
because it seemed the right thing, those doors
Those
always
words.
closed and something always brought me right back onto this path. And I felt crazy sometimes.
I can
And
relate.
so, I think it's like, it's an interesting balance, like you're talking about, between following and leading yourself. And I think one of the things you were talking about, how some people have the recipe within them, but they can't be successful. I and I don't know if you believe this, but I think the difference between those people who have that recipe and they have that drive, but they're not able to break through, and the ones that do break through is a sense of personal responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a hot topic in our culture right now, but
Yeah.
um, I would agree. I think that having purpose, like there's a clear why that is your anchor, and then a deep sense of personal responsibility to fulfill that is the foundation for growth and the motivation or the discipline, the drive it's going to take to break through. And I think social responsibility is really important. We're talking a lot about that in our culture right now. I don't think we get to social responsibility without personal responsibility. It's the bedrock,
It
the
always
foundation.
starts here first,
Always.
right? But like I can look at all the reasons that I have failed, which are many volumes of books. I could write all the books on your shelf about
You
my
and me
failures.
both.
I think the difference was there came a point, it wasn't all the time. I failed a lot, but as soon as I started saying what is happening in my business or in my life or to me is not my fault, but it is my responsibility,
Yes.
that was the game changer. And that
Yes.
was when I was able to actually break through.
I love that
And what about
frame,
you?
right? Because there are things that happen to us that are not quote unquote our fault,
Yeah.
but it is our responsibility to respond to it, right? And how we respond to it.
Hmm.
And it's another thing we're very caught up in our culture is pointing the finger outwards and blaming and fault. I just don't find any use for it. I don't think it's an effective way to deal with life. And so to
Yeah.
that point, it's like when you own responsibility, that doesn't necessarily, that's not you saying, well, this is all my fault. Because again,
Mm.
things happen to us that may or may not be our fault, but it is our responsibility how we deal with it, right?
Yeah.
Response able. Um,
Yeah.
and so I hear you loud and clear. I think it's beautiful. And I could, at least from my perspective, I've had plenty of failure that was absolutely my fault, but taking
Mhm.
responsibility is key to bringing any real change to the game. And I think
Well, and
that's where
it's
it
so
starts.
powerful when you accept the fault. So I was on a phone call yesterday with some colleagues, and I did this thing that I do, which is not great. But sometimes I will just put my head in the sand and just run and go fix something, but I won't communicate what I'm doing. Like I'm like, oh,
No
I can't be
entrepreneur everywhere can relate to that.
yeah.
Then
Yeah. And so then, I have colleagues and from the outside looking in, it looks like I steamrolled them, I
right,
bulldozed them, and I
right,
was completely disrespectful to them because guess what? I was.
yeah,
Like, even though I wasn't meaning to, I completely ran off in a direction, fixed the problems that they told me they had, but didn't communicate that that's what I was doing. And then I was left with a mess on my hands. I could have done one of two things. I could have argued with them,
yes,
told them how much they were unfair to me because I actually fixed it and I'm right and it could have been a big fight. Or, we get onto, a meeting, a conversation, and the first thing out the gate that I say is, I'm really sorry, you guys. I completely do this thing where I fail to communicate about what I'm up to. And then I do this and I fix it but, but I don't let anyone else know. And I did that this time and it's not great at all. And I'm really sorry I did it. Um, and I did it again, and now all of a sudden we've disarmed and
right,
no one has anything to fight about. So
yes.
people come to the call looking for a fight or anticipating an argument, and there is none to be had. So then all that's left in that space is acceptance, and we move forward.
The opportunity for acceptance. Hey, you change the
Hmm.
conversation when you take
Hmm.
ownership right out the gate. I think one of my favorite questions to ask my students and my clients, it's usually an early conversation we're having, is how are you complicit in creating the reality you say you don't want? How are
Oh.
you complicit in creating the reality you say you don't want?
How do you get people there when they're not there? I mean, really?
Well, it's Byron Katie. I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but she has a process she literally calls the work. But it's
Okay.
4 questions to just get the crack of light and understanding how you're creating your own reality. And so I employ that fairly regularly. But her first question is, how do you know this is true? So you say, you know,
Mm.
everything is a certain way, right? Usually when you see global statements, everyone, everything,
When people project something, it's always a global statement.
right? Global statements,
This person is terrible.
or it's
Yes.
everyone,
Yeah.
anyone, never,
Mhm.
anything that sounds like that, right? It's
Yeah. Mhm.
so then the first question is, well, how do you know that's true? I just know it's true. They're really animated about it, right? And you they're shut
Mhm.
down at this point. There's nothing getting in there. They're absolutely certain. They're very emotional about it. Second question: are you absolutely certain that's true? I know that may seem like you're asking the same question, but the first 2 questions are simply to get the person to realize there's at least a
Mm.
chance what they're believing isn't true. So you get to the second one. If somebody's really shut down, they're still going to have a hard time with the answer. But usually, if you just sit quietly, they'll think like, well, I mean, maybe I'm not. Maybe that's not accurate, right? You just give them a sense to kind of
Yeah.
think through, and they're like, yeah, okay, well, maybe I'm wrong. And then the third question, well, how does it make you feel believing this is true?
Oh.
Shitty. I
Oh.
feel horrible. Right. And you don't rescue them from this description. Just let them
Uh,
sit in the
I'm just
feeling.
feeling that in my stomach right now. It almost feels like you shoved a knife in there and you twisted it. I'm
Right.
like,
Right.
"Oh, it's
And you do
terrible."
not rescue the person from their process. So you just sit and let that simmer.
Ooh.
Right. And they just start describing. And I've had people, grown ass adults, cry describing this, whatever their belief system. It could be simple as, why their husband doesn't pick up the socks, or why the wife is so frustrated with the dishes not being. It could be over like all sorts of different things. You just sit with this and they describe their experience of what they experience believing this is true, after fully acknowledging, well, maybe it isn't true how I see this, right? And then the final question, which I love, and there's a turn to this too, but the final question is, what would it be like if this wasn't true?
Ooh.
Oh my God, I'd feel so much lighter. I'd feel so much better. And it's an entire reframe in 4 questions that get people to realize, okay, I'm choosing to look at the world this way.
Yeah.
I'm not certain this is true, but I am choosing to see it this way. it's having this impact on me. And there is another way to see it that I acknowledge would make me feel a whole lot different. So
Mhm.
Byron Katie's the work. It's fantastic. Those four questions I employ in different frames constantly
Wow.
just to get people to realize there. I do, by the way, 100% uh, know there is capital T truth. Humans just don't operate in a lot of it. Most of it is lowercase truth, right? It's our perception, our opinion, our story about a thing, which is
Mhm.
beautiful. I think it's part of the human experience. And I'm not knocking that, but there is a difference between my truth and the truth, or at least there can be. And understanding when the subjective part of it comes in, it certainly can be true to us, but anything that can be true to us also doesn't inherently need to be true to us. It's something we're deciding, right? And so then we're writing our own story. And that's important, I think, to realize.
Yeah. I think so for one, I can see how powerful that is, and I can also see how hard it might be to use in day-to-day business because a lot of people aren't going to be there, but I'd love to find a way to like maybe water it down a little because so I have 38 companies on my portfolio and growing. And, my company's founders, in addition to just like my staff, my team, all day long, I basically feel like I sit there listening to people's perceptions.
Right.
And
Me
I
too.
spew them out too, of course, all day long. But there's a lot of perceptions that I hear that I'm like, this company is not going to make it, or this person is not going to break through because their perceptions that they're pushing out and their
Yes.
inability to receive any feedback, not even like verbal feedback, but just to receive anything is means that
Limited.
this person is on a collision course and there's nothing I can do about this
Yeah.
because
There's an old saying, we're all writing our own stories, but very often only the successful are willing to admit it. And
mm,
it's, you see this when you're coaching people or you're working with a client or you're working with a partner, and then they're, for whatever reason, not willing to see it, right? And it is a choice. So there's something subjectively that they either don't want to see, or they don't want to acknowledge, or they don't want to change their perspective on it. And it's again, how am I complicit in creating the reality I don't want? And how do you coach that person? It's very difficult to get somebody to see something they don't want to see.
yeah, for
It,
ourselves included.
yeah, first and foremost, yeah,
hmm
for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're dancing around the topic a little bit, but it's the discussion we've had before about the different energies and the interplay between them of the masculine energy and the feminine energy, and right before we hopped on here and started having this conversation, we were talking about how the feminine energy as an energy, which also happens to be embodied by women, but it's not embodied by men, is first and foremost a space.
Yeah, I love that you
And
said it that way. And it's such a beautiful way of explaining that. And you can feel that. You can intuit that, right? Like, I'm looking at your space. I wish I was there, but I could, it's like it embodies an energy and a space that supports life, right? And that you're right, that it is a
Mhm.
space.
It's a space of acceptance and of not projecting or pushing anything. Like it in the feminine space, and when I'm feeling more like in the flow of that, I'm accepting of all things, all people, all situations. I'm just sort of like life flows through me and I flow with life. Versus when I'm in a masculine space, I'm doing things, I'm solving things, I'm driving something forward, I'm
Yes.
pushing. And that interplay requires some sort of self awareness within you to realize, our default in our society is to be pushing and doing and accomplishing and achieving. You have to let go, you have to release, and you have to trust to become a space in
Yes.
order to be allowing. And in that space of allowing is where you can do that work.
Yes. I describe that as doing from the place of being, right? Like, that's your best work is done from being and doing. And so you can
hmm
describe the feminine as being and
Being,
the masculine as doing. And
doing.
there is a
hmm
cycle to this that is really beautiful. But when you position your doing from being, it it's a creative energy, which is woman, right? Which is the
Mhm.
feminine. And
Mhm.
it's a different kind of energy to create in the world than from doing. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Right. Where the masculine, we were both talking about it, there is a catabolic element to masculine energy without the counterbalance of the feminine, which I think is more anabolic. And so it's a more exhaustive energy because it is a giving or um, a creating in the world, a doing energy. And so the balance of the two is important. And you touched on this, but just to come back to it, women have both masculine and feminine energy.
Mhm.
Generally, although there are exceptions, women tend to house the feminine energy more potently and more commonly, but they house both. And same with the
Mhm.
male. The
Uh-huh.
male has both feminine and masculine energy, though the male tends to house more of the masculine energy, although there are exceptions there too. But understanding the interplay between these two energies and how they work together and how important they are, and when they're in balance, there is a magic that happens that's like nothing else on earth. It's an energy. It's the energy to create, quite literally.
Yeah.
And that's the space I think we need to get back to, where we're not diminishing one over the other or prioritizing one over the other, but learning how important that interplay is, and understanding it's in that combination that we really find the juice. That's where the real magic is.
The combination within ourselves, but also the combination within our relationships,
Yes.
whether they're business relationships, romantic relationships, team dynamics. I think about it a lot in my team dynamic and in how I've built my company because I know that I have predominantly feminine energy. And when I know this for many reasons, I have masculine energy. Obviously, I do a lot of things and get a lot of stuff done, but it depletes me very quickly, and I quickly get tired. So I know if I'm solely in masculine energy and I'm quickly depleted, that like I can't be in that always. So I have to find balances within my business as well as within my life and my partnerships in my life that allow me to be who I really am, and I think that, but it starts with you and learning how to accept and allow and embody both.
So beautifully said. And for the women listening, how would you do you have a ritual or routine or something you do that allows you to kind of move back into the feminine and kind of
Yeah.
you kind of put masculine on as a tool or like a
Hmm.
here's something I'm using, and then
Yeah.
how do you come back to the feminine? Because we talked about this and you see this where it's like sometimes it's hard for people to get out of the masculine. It's like they're always in that and it wears them out. Right. So
Yes.
how do you find yourself, what rituals, routines, or how do you get yourself back into the feminine?
Yeah. I call the masculine energy a weapon of war. I pick it up when I need it. I
Yeah.
use it with precision to
Beautiful.
get things done, and then I put it down because
Yeah.
I'm done, and I don't need it. So I would say, even before you get to the rituals, it's extremely important to do the healing work because the feminine energy is often blocked by
Mm.
trauma and by, you know, distrust of ourselves, distrust of others, distrust of masculine energy. And so we all have this. I'm not, but I think that first and foremost, you have to work through that stuff. And same with masculine energy. Men need to work through a lot of that stuff too in order to be truly in their grounded masculine presence. I've met a lot of men who they look masculine, but I actually feel in my body very unsafe around them. And I think it's because they're not really, something in me is saying this person's not safe.
I would
You know,
describe them. I call them man boys. They're not.
yes.
They house the male body, but they have not matured into the masculine.
Yeah. Yeah. And, sometimes there's, behaviors and things like that that are bad. But even then, they can be great people. But as a woman, I would never be able to surrender and trust
Yes.
into them. And I can feel there's a sense, I call it melting. When I feel like I can relax, it's when I'm in the presence of embodied, strong, grounded masculine. And that allows me to relax. And if I can't, I have to be in my masculine because I have to
Mm.
protect myself. And this is all like primal, but women need to do the work to be able to surrender, first and foremost, just in the comfort of their own selves, in order to be able to surrender
Yes.
in the world, and so that's first. And the healing work. And then I would say I have rituals. So, during my work day is my work day, and I try to be very regimented, and I've also built in a lot of support and allowing to be supported. Whereas when I was very rigidly masculine, many years ago, I didn't allow people to support me
Mm.
because I didn't trust anyone, you know? And so, and if you would have asked me that, I would never have admitted to that. But now I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, I totally was unable to release, trust, and allow others to support me, whether it's a colleague, a, you know, whatever, or a man. And so then I would say I find small things that sort of remind me and trigger the feminine energy within me. So, like, my space is like like I'm a sensual person. So I always have like, you know, a fluffy pillow or something like that. Colors, colorful, like a lot of these things, which are very surface.
Mhm.
They're sort of superficial, but they do help. And then I have rituals. So like every night I have like a tea thing, and that tea is my time. And I make the tea and sit quiet, and I just allow myself to feel.
Mm.
And I think that any opportunities and rituals that you can create for yourself to feel
Mm.
is
Yes.
that allows it to flow through you. And so, like, I will go deep within myself and I'll check in, like, how am I feeling about what happened today? How am I feeling about comes tomorrow? Why am I feeling that way? And really going into the feeling side, completely not logical. And I have opportunities for myself to do that always regularly. That means that I'm more tapped into my feelings and my heart on a regular basis because I'm practiced, you
Mm.
know, at it. And then, take time off work. I mean, it's really hard, but, walk on the beach. I love to go to the farmer's market. I buy flowers. I get fresh like produce and fruit, and I prep and I cook, and that's a ritual for me that grounds me. And life is not all about being, doing, driving, pursuing, but I think the opportunities that you build in to allow yourself to feel is really important.
Yeah, beautifully said. I agree. And I want to go back to something you said earlier, which my own experience in coaching women. Um, it, Very often, when you see women that are sort of stuck in the masculine, it's because they
Mm-hmm.
don't feel safe. And you'll see, like, even women that come across very masculine, in the presence of a true masculine energy, will release that masculine energy in themselves and shift into the feminine when they feel safe to do so, which is
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. This all made me think. I haven't given this much thought yet, but it also made me think. I wonder if there is a counterpoint in this, where just where our society is now, where men are showing up in the feminine for the exact same reason, because there's an interchange there where they don't feel comfortable showing up in the masculine. Is there's a
Mm-hmm.
subdued. I'm seeing more and more dudes show up in a much more subdued masculine. Or there, I get a lot of questions. I get DM'd a lot from guys trying to understand what the nature of being a man is right now, for a number of
Mm.
reasons, which is an interesting conversation. Or just, how do you show up as a man? And they're it's like they almost feel bad showing up in the masculine, or have a really kind of fucked up view of what masculine energy is,
Is,
um,
yeah.
which is
Well,
also
I
the
think
case.
it's hard because when you have women who won't allow men to lead, then men when you've been routinely told not to lead, like, don't be a leader because I will not follow you and my leadership is more better than yours, whatever, then men would stop leading, you
Yeah,
know?
or I think the thing when we react to air, we historically when we react to air, we cause more air, and so you've seen kind of the swing um, towards more feminism and prioritizing the feminine, which, by the way, I think for many reasons is appropriate, but not at the cost of the masculine. And that's where
No.
when we react to air, we cause more air. And so
Mhm.
if you're responding from a wound or from trauma, that's very often what happens. And so you just create more pain because the unhealed parts in you create wounds. You're just going to create more of what's in you. And so I think in an effort to try to protect or to amplify or to support the feminine, some cases maybe intentionally, but I'm just going to say unintentionally for the moment, we have muted or confused what the masculine is. And there's just a lot of dudes, young men, who seem very confused about how to show up in the masculine, what that is. And so they'll think being assertive is a negative thing, or
Mhm.
being aggressive or pioneering or adventurous is a negative thing.
Adventurous.
Yeah, and or that that's looked down upon, and it's like, oh, I can't be too dominating, I can't be too domineering. I'm like, let me help you. We would not be a country if there wasn't men that weren't willing to step up and take those roles, right? They're like, and it's a called for action in history. It just you have to probably is I think Maslow sends the word. He says everything is a nail. He was good with a hammer, sees everything as a nail. So if you don't know how to use the energy appropriately, and that's all you know how to do, you will inevitably misuse it. But not
Yeah.
understanding it or denying it simply because you're either confused by it or afraid of what other people are going to think is not healthy either. I think that it's the coming together where we teach this. How does the feminine and the masculine do the dance together? How do we synergize that in a way where they're supporting one another and those roles are creating magic on earth? Heaven on earth is the intent, which I
I
think is
think
possible.
well, and I think, when we're trying to create businesses of purpose and impact and something that means something, you have to have the balance of the two, I mean, I'm a female VC working in health equity and impact. And, I have a strong female presence both in my company as in my portfolio, but I am very, very adamant that we will never be an all women team because I think that that balance is powerful.
Yes.
And I look at what it is that we've been able to accomplish over the past only a year, and it's impossible on paper. The math does not add up. How did we do it? And there's a few things that I will tell people. Out people who don't get it, I will say, alignment and multipliers. And when you've got, people aligned, 1 + 1 = 3 and or 11, and everyone on the, all the investors who are involved and all the team were all aligned. But in reality, it is that, but it's also the interplay between the masculine and the feminine energy. We attract, we amplify. And if you are only operating the masculine, there's no attraction
Mm,
and you will struggle to amplify.
mm,
And
beautiful.
so I think that that's how, if you've got big things you want to create, the only way to do it is to understand how to have this balance, and it's a practice. It's not like you like go check the box, like, okay, we got some feminine energy here. We're good.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's a practice. So, I would love to hear from you, if you were sitting across from an entrepreneur who is just starting out on their journey and, they were in that place where you were, maybe they are in year one of their business and things are tough and they just got a job offer, baby at home, all of that stuff. Or maybe they are, just in a dark place, or maybe they haven't started yet. What would you, knowing what you know now and with all the success that you've had now, want to tell them?
I was going to comment on this earlier, and just thinking about your own story and mine. Like
Hmm.
how different so many lives would have been had we given up.
Mm.
Like that's what gives me the chills. What if I would have thrown in the towel? And here's the thing, like if I would have said, "Hey, I got a 9-month old, I'm newly married, I got to take care of my family, and I take the safe route," nobody's faulting me for that.
No.
They're all going to go, "Oh, good on you. You're being responsible," which is
Mhm.
what really pisses me off, which is why so many people get lost because that just seems like good math. Right? It's like, oh yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Nobody's going to tell you, but I knew. I would have known that I was not living up to my best. And so part of this is I don't know if it's a one size fits all. You really have to know yourself. What are you made of? And I think those times of pressure really reveal, they may make you, but I think they're more likely to reveal what's in you. Right? What comes
Yeah.
to the surface when you're under pressure? How do you respond to that? And that was my point. And since then I was foolish in thinking that, well, if you're married, you have children, you have things you're responsible for, you would inherently be more driven to be focused and get the work done. I now realize that isn't the case. Those aren't necessarily preset
Yeah.
conditions that are going to work for everybody. But I would say if you're in that position, you really have to know what you're about, right? Learn how to trust yourself, know who you are. That's the work. And I think, entrepreneurship is just a fancy word for self development or personal development. You put yourself in a
Yeah.
situation where
That's
you
the whole point of this podcast.
100%, right? It's
Yeah.
like you have to learn as an entrepreneur, you don't get the luxury. I mean, you could try, but you don't get the luxury of pointing the finger at other people for why you're not a success. It falls squarely on you. It's
Yeah.
personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Everything is amplified through that. So you have to know what you're about. I used to think entrepreneurship was really the path for everybody, or that you should always take that route if given the choice. But I think for some people, it isn't the route. And you have to know yourself well enough to know what you want and what really matters to you. Now, the litmus test for that is, and one of the questions I ask people that I'm coaching is whatever they're seeking. Let's say they want to build a business and they have an idea of what they want, but they're struggling. And they come to me and they say, I'm just not sure this is what I really want. I go, okay, I understand that. But let me ask you a question. If if your business was how you envisioned it, everything was running great, your team was amazing, you were profitable, would you feel this way? And they go, no, of course not. If everything was great, I would love what I'm doing. I'm like, well, then you're probably doing the right thing. Right? In other words, if the reason you don't want to do it is circumstance, that's generally not a good reason to abandon your pursuit. Right? It's
Mhm.
like if it's like you can envision the perfect business and the way it is, and you're like, no, that it's not what I want. I'm not passionate about that. Even if everything was amazing, I still wouldn't be excited about it. That's a different discussion. So when people want
Yeah.
to quit something, and that's what I ask them. It's like, well, if these conditions weren't present, if these circumstances weren't present, would you no longer be excited about this? And they're like, no, of course I'd be excited. I'm like, okay, well, so then this is a circumstance thing, not a passion thing. Well, let's address the circumstances because we don't want to make long-term decisions based on short-term problems or circumstantial problems. And that was my point earlier is I love studying success literature. As you can tell, these books are real. I read a ton,
Mm.
and these two shelves are biographies of politics and then business. Um, and one of my favorite things is to get to that point in the story when the person should have quit. And
Mhm.
for every successful person,
Mhm.
there is that moment in
Yeah.
which most humans would say, "You should have quit," or "Why didn't you quit?" or "Nobody would have blamed you for quitting." Well, that's
Yeah.
well, why didn't they quit? What made them different? And that those stories change trajectory of not only their families, but very often countries or humanity simply because they did not quit, right? They decided to go a different path and they didn't allow circumstance to be the reason why they didn't do something. And it's always the case. Circumstance is always the reason, right? That's
Yeah.
we can have enough circumstances to justify why we quit. I think about Elon Musk. He's lobbing freaking rockets up into space, and his first three blow up before they get off the pad. And he's got one more left, and he's going to be bankrupt if it doesn't go up. And he's like, yeah,
Mhm.
let's lob this fucker up, see what happens.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Why? Why didn't you quit?
That's a really interesting thing to talk about because I always think I always tell myself I'm not allowed to quit on a bad day.
100%.
I can only, if I'm going to quit, I quit on a good
So
day.
funny. That's exactly my thought too. I'm gonna quit on top. If I'm quitting on top.
If you're quitting on top. Yeah, I
Yep.
actually joked. I was joking to Brian at Expert Dojo because this last cohort that we launched was like amazing. And I told him, I said, I think I just need to quit because I'm not going to top this.
It's like
So, mic drop, I'm out.
I'm
He's
out.
like, you better not. I'm like, I don't know, I can't top it. But I think I have to top it. But anyway, so Sebastian, where can people connect with you?
I'm most active right now on IG and TikTok. So that's probably the best way to get, or go to my website, sebastianenges.com. But at Sebastian Enges on all platforms, um, you can reach me there. But I'm most active on IG, Instagram, and TikTok. And I generally respond to my DMs. I try. It's getting a bit more challenging, but I try to
Yeah.
respond to everyone when I can.
You have any programs rolling out, or you have a program that would be rolling out here in the future
Yeah,
or near?
we're gonna be offering some group coaching. I think we're launching that next month in November, which I'm really excited about. I wasn't planning on doing it. There was a lot of people started asking for coaching, and I don't have a lot of time for one-on-one coaching.
Yeah, me neither.
It's not generally a good use of my time.
Hmm.
Within reason. So we're going to offer some educational programs and more of a group coaching platform that I'm super excited about. So we're launching that. I'm doing a lot more speaking. We're working on a speaking tour next year for 2023, which I'm really excited about. I'm going to, get out and be with the people and do a lot more,
Be with the people.
do a lot more speaking and just connect with guys out in public. I'm not a social media
And
guy.
girls.
Yeah, and girls. Yeah, guys is a ubiquitous term. I gotta catch that. Somebody gave me busted
Mhm.
my balls. I was quoting an old saying: "If you want to give something done, give it to a busy man." And a bunch of people were like, "It's people, women too." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Yes, yes." And in my mind, when I say man, unless I'm being very deliberate, I'm regarding humanity, not particular gender. But fair enough.
But, in the context of coaching, though, that's why I had to correct you because there's some people who coach men.
100%.
And so I wanted to, put that out there. The program is not only for men, it is also for women. It would
Yeah,
be fine if it was just for men, but
yeah.
it's not.
Fair enough. Exactly.
Yes.
100% right. It's for both. So, yeah, we have some fun things tuned up. I think for the next 12 months, it'll be fun.
Sounds very exciting. So, everybody, you met him here, not first, but hopefully this podcast with Sebastian is the best that's out there. Lots of wisdom, lots of knowledge. We talked about business. We talked about feminine and masculine energy. We talked about, gosh, I don't know, major turning points. We covered a lot of ground. We will break those down a little bit in the show notes for you all. But until next time, thanks, Adventures, for joining us here. And we will see you right back here for the next episode.